Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Luke James, not the singer. You are tuned in to the very first episode of my podcast, which is self-titled. We might come up with another title a little bit later, but I figure for now I'm just going to go with this because most people are probably familiar with me from the channel. You know it's Luke James Reviews, you know I'm Luke James, so the Luke James Podcast is what it's going to be for now. Now, as usual, if you want, you can hit up Luke at redmattersite.com, that's S-I-T-E, if you want your music reviewed, if you want some promo, and also to send in any questions and topics that you want to hear discussed on this podcast. I'm going to keep this one very casual. I will be having guests on eventually, so in the meantime, I want you guys to send in some questions that I might be able to use, or whatever you want to hear me talk about. That'll just help me keep things rolling, rather than you just having to listen to me rant and rave about whatever I want to all the time. That's what it's going to be most of the time, but I certainly want to make sure there's a lot of engagement here between me and you, the listeners. Now, we're going to start off on a pretty sad note here. Mac Miller was found overdosed at the age of 26 just recently, and this is just a really crushing blow to hip-hop, man. I'm not going to sit here and act like I was the hugest fan of Mac Miller or anything like that, but just because I wasn't a huge fan, that doesn't mean that I can't feel for him, his friends, and his family. You know what it's like whenever somebody dies. You always get people out there saying, "Oh, so you're a fan now?" But that's not what it's about. It's about the loss of human life, and as I said, one that had a huge impact on hip-hop culture and a lot of people. I actually found out about this. It just randomly started trending on Twitter, and I was in disbelief, man. Couldn't believe that this had happened yet again, yet another young rapper gone, because it seems like we've lost so many within the past little while. We remember Lil Peep overdosed last year, and Fredo Santana had died of complications that may have had to do with lean. But we got to remember that it's not just this younger generation. I see sometimes people are saying, "Oh, it's these young guys, man. Back in the day, it wasn't like that." But even some of our OGs had this shit going on. If you want to talk about Pimp C and Big Mo with the lean, I'm sure there's some other people out there who had substance abuse issues. So this isn't something that's unique to the younger generation. It has happened to the old generation. But I do have to say that as a bit of an old head, it's kind of interesting how the drug culture in hip-hop has shifted so much. When I was coming up in the 90s, it was smoking endo and sipping gin and juice. But these days, it's Percocet, Molly Percocet, and all kinds of other Xans, Bands, Beans, Lean, and whatever else these kids are doing. I don't know. These kids. Look at me, man. First episode, I'm already standing on my lawn shaking my fist. Meanwhile, my cat is upstairs ripping shit up. You might have heard that. But one of the things I like most about Mac, just to bring it all back, is just how he was always evolving and trying new things, man. I'm not going to act like I can break down all his projects. I didn't hear all of them. As I said, I wasn't the hugest fan, so I'm not going to front like I know everything about his music. But from what I did hear, I could really tell that he was pouring his heart out in his music. He just always seemed like a very genuine guy, and that's kind of what makes this death especially sad. He's been dealing with substance abuse, depression, suicidal thoughts, and loneliness throughout much of his albums, and it really makes you wonder about all these other artists who are bringing this content in their music. On one hand, we tend to say, "Oh, it's just music. You don't got to take it too seriously. Don't worry about it." But this is an instance where it really is more than music, you know? We've seen this happen before with drugs and violence in hip-hop. That's just kind of the way that it works out. I just think talking about these issues is really what is going to help people to move forward, just to have conversations with each other as well as taking a look at ourselves. So I'm really hoping that people can learn from the situation and do better for themselves. Sometimes I even sit back and I think of myself when I was younger, close to Mac's age, maybe even a bit younger than that. And there was a time where I was doing a lot of drinking and drugs, man. Like every day I was drinking, drugs once in a while. I'm not going to sit here and act like I was an addict or like I was out of control, because I wasn't. I was still maintaining and doing my thing. But when stuff like this happens, sometimes I think what would have happened if I had taken that to the extreme, or if I didn't stop. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure some of you guys know people who've had these experiences. Maybe you had them yourselves. Maybe you've watched friends and family members get caught up in it. But it's the type of thing that sometimes you don't realize it's an issue until it's too late. Or, you know, when you're older. Like, I can look back now, and at that time, I thought I was just having fun, man. Everyone around me was doing the same thing because it was cool and fun to do. But now that I'm older, I look back and realize, man, I was wrecking myself with some of that shit that I was doing. So, you know, don't self-medicate. Practice that self-care. Find something else to do with your time. I'm not going to sit here and shame people or make people feel bad. Or, you know, I know people are going to do what they're going to do, but it just is sad to see another person gone just from abusing these pills, man. The shit is just real sad. I actually don't know if this was suicidal or accidental yet. I don't think all that information has come out yet. But either way, it is what it is, man. These pills and hip-hop. Rest in peace, Mac Miller, and hopefully anyone else who's self-medicating heavily and or dealing with mental health issues can get the help that they need and deserve. But we are going to lighten things up a bit and move on to the next topic by discussing Joe Budden versus Eminem. On his recent podcast, Joe Budden said that he's better than Eminem over the past decade and that Eminem has no content. And there was much more to that podcast, so if you want to get into it, by all means, go ahead. But I just wanted to focus on these two ideas because it seems like that's what's caused the most discussion. Everyone's debating it now. Has Eminem had content over the past decade? And who would win in a battle? Or who is a better MC, Joe Budden or Eminem? So first of all, I can definitely understand the idea of Joe being more consistent than M over the past 10 years, because based on the Joe projects that I have listened to, there was nothing that was all out dumpster juice. Whereas you look at Eminem's catalog, and goddamn, man, he had plenty of trash songs and albums within the past 10 years. We can just look at the albums he dropped in that time. I mean, come on, man. You got Relapse in 2009, Recovery 2010, MMLP2 in 2013, Revival in 2017, and then, of course, Kamikaze just recently this year in 2018. So if you look at those albums, just between those albums, there are plenty of trash-ass songs on there. And yet at the same time, there's some great tracks on those albums as well. As much as I really don't ride for Eminem in any discussion, I'd say that he's easily had higher highs and more memorable moments than Joe has had in the past 10 years. If you put a piece of paper and a pen in front of me and you said, write down 10 Joe Budden songs within the past 10 years, I swear to God I would have a hard time doing that. And that's not me knocking Joe Budden. I mean, I'm sure plenty of other people could do that easily, depending on how big of a Joe Budden fan you are. But if I can't put Pump It Up on that list, I'm going to be searching for a lot of other shit. What else we got? What's that one? In Fire. You know that one? Just wanna make this shit loud in here. Jersey's clear. We on fire or something like that. I forget what it was called, but I don't know. He's had some good projects. Don't get me wrong. He's certainly put out enough projects that I would say he's more consistent. I would definitely say within the past 10 years, Joe Budden has been more consistent than Eminem. I think that's fair to say. But Eminem has made more memorable songs for sure. He's had more hits. Probably some better verses in there. Like, you got to sift through some garbage to find it. But it's really hard to pick who is actually better. Just depends on how you're going to look at it. Joe's more consistent. M's got more memorable shit. It's up to you how you feel about that. And as for Eminem having no content, I just think that's false, man. Most of you guys know how hard of a critic I am on Eminem, and I really feel like his downfall started with Encore. I know some people like that shit, but that to me was just where he really started to get extra goofy with it and things were falling off. But in spite of that, one thing he's never lacked is the content. I mean, he does bring that goofy, ridiculous shit into his music. We all know that. But if we're specifically going to talk about the past decade, then we got to remember what he was rapping about on those past albums I mentioned. Throughout those albums, he was dealing with substance abuse issues, family issues, giving us some storytelling tracks like 2 a.m. on Relapse, for example, or was it 4 a.m.? I don't know. It was sometime in the morning. He was killing motherfuckers. There's all kinds of content that he was giving us. I wasn't even in love with those albums, but I do think Relapse is probably better than a lot of people give it credit for. I would say that. But just to say that M hasn't had any content that doesn't match up. Now, you could go into detail about how maybe he brings the same things up a lot because Eminem certainly has a lane. He's been dealing with substance abuse, whether falling victim to it, trying to recover from it, you know, sort of the horrorcore elements with killing people, kidnapping people, that song on Relapse, same song and dance, I think it was. So you are getting the same sort of content, but he's still delivering content. People often say Eminem is just rapidy rap. And they even said that about this last album, Kamikaze. And I think if that's what you think, I'm wondering if you really listened to what he was saying. I'm not saying it was like the craziest shit he was spitting, but come on, man, he had all kinds of stuff he was saying on there, even though he was calling out names, speaking on his last project. I know people didn't like that, but there was content there. For me to say that he didn't have content, he just happened to be rapping about nothing, which I don't think he was. So I don't know, man. You guys can let me know what you think. Who do you think has been better in the past 10 years, Eminem or Joe Budden? And do you agree that Eminem doesn't have content? I want you to let me know in the comments section. We're going to take a quick break. Right now, I don't really have anything for the break. I do plan on reaching out to some of my friends who are rappers as well as other channels, maybe to get some little ads just to help spread the word and help out, you know what I'm saying? But for now, we're just going to have a blank space or some shit. I don't know. We'll see. But hang on, because we're going to come back and we're going to talk some gaming and movies. So stay tuned.
What's going on, everybody? It's the Granddad of Granddad Wooly from youtube.com/GranddadRDLR, the home of Wooly reviews and all things Granddad Wooly. And right now, you are tuned in to the Luke James podcast. So listen to the shit. I mean, you already are, but keep listening to it because it's fire, nigga. It's fire.
All right, everybody, we're back. Apparently, I did wind up getting a couple of ads, so you got to shout out Granddad. I think he's got one of the most underrated channels on YouTube. So make sure you show him some love. He does reviews for all kinds of stuff. Food, music, movies, TV shows. And he also has a series called Gaming with the Granddad where he does some live playing. So make sure you check that out. And this is really the perfect introduction to the second segment, where I'm going to talk about some of my experiences with video games. Dr. Legs on Twitter asked me to speak on this, so I figured it might be a cool idea for me just to go in on some of my video game history, just to let you guys know where I come from as far as games go. And then when you hear me talking about games on this podcast, you can kind of use this episode as a bit of a reference point, just so you understand where I'm coming from. So I'm about to all the way nerd out here, so if you don't care about games, this section is not going to be for you. But if you're a gamer, I think you might enjoy this, and make sure you hit me up in the comments section to let me know your gaming history. What did you start with? What games do you love? And what are some of your fondest memories? So first things first, man, I definitely came up in a video game household, and I'd probably say that video games were my first love even before music. I can vaguely remember playing Atari back in the 80s. My family had that, but I would have been quite young, so I don't count that too much. Kind of remember E.T. You might have heard about that game. It was one of the worst games of all time, and I played it, so I can definitely confirm it's garbage. We had Circus, that was a good one. I don't remember too much else, but as far as the system that really started everything for me, I would say it was the original Nintendo. That shit had it been injectable, I swear to God, you would have found needles laying around my bedroom right next to my Ninja Turtles, because I love Nintendo. I remember getting Battletoads and Mario Bros. 3 for Christmas one year, and just not really caring about opening anything else. I think you guys know what it's like whenever you get a game on Christmas. You just kind of, you don't care about grandma's sweater when you open up that new Call of Duty or whatever it is that you might be getting. You're just trying to shoot some shit up, not wear a shirt that has a puppy on it or whatever it might be. So I can really remember that very fondly. Battletoads, of course, one of the hardest games of all time. To this day, I never beat it, and that speeder bike level is probably one of the worst things that ever happened in my life. And as far as Super Mario Bros. 3 goes, it's kind of funny to look back, because in 2018, to look back then and try to explain this craze to someone who wasn't there when it happened, it's got to be laughable, because you look at the graphics now and how the games are just so crazy. But this one, it just looks so simple now, just looking at how far video games have come. But that game was just ahead of its curve, man. It was so fun. The graphics at the time were incredible. And it was even a part of the movie The Wizard. I don't know how many of you remember that, but that was the one where the kid would always go, California. That old shit, man. That was a classic back in the day. But Nintendo also introduced me to role-playing games. This is where my role-playing game love really started off. And I remember playing Dragon Warrior and Final Fantasy. Those were the two games that really kicked it off, but I would have been so young at the time, I didn't really know what I was doing. I remember one of the neighbor kids, he was a bit older than me, and he had those games, so I'd go over and play them, but I'd really just be messing shit up and hopefully not saving over his save files. Then when the Super Nintendo came out, we got games like Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger, and my favorite game of all time, Final Fantasy VI, man. I love that game. I could probably do a whole podcast episode on that, or maybe a segment. I mean, we'll see what goes on with this series, man. I might do some fun top 10s and stuff like that in regards to video games as we move on, but that was one of my favorite games. And it's just funny to look back, because when my brother brought that Super Nintendo home, I remember us thinking that nothing will ever be better than this. There's no way the music will be better. There's no way the graphics will be better. This is the pinnacle. This is the ultimate in graphics. But I mean, you look at games now, and it's hilarious, man. Some of them damn near look like movies. Well, Super Nintendo graphics really aren't that great. I mean, they are charming when we look back at them. But it's just kind of funny to think that things are always moving forward so fast with video games, especially these days where shit is out of hand. Now, I was also very lucky to have a lot of friends in my neighborhood who had all kinds of systems, so even though I never owned a Genesis or Nintendo 64 myself, I still got to play all the games. I remember GoldenEye and wrestling games on Nintendo 64 held my neighborhood down for years, and if you were someone who used Oddjob, you were cheap as hell in that GoldenEye, man. You cannot use him, that little short boy, man. You can't use that. Well, he wasn't a boy, but he was short, but anyone who used him, you're cheap. I remember Kevin Nash's jackknife powerbomb just being out of control, knocking motherfuckers out all over the place in those wrestling games. So I have a lot of good memories with the Nintendo 64. And even though the Genesis wasn't as good as Super Nintendo, definitely had its moments, man. The Disney games were always better on Sega Genesis. I don't know why, but if you've ever played Aladdin or Lion King, you know they were better on Genesis than the Super Nintendo. And there were some other fun series that Genesis had that the other systems didn't. To this day, I would say the Shining Force series is one of my favorites. But with the next step, my path really gets different from a lot of people, man. Most people were getting the PlayStation, including my older brother, so I did still get to experience that. A lot of my friends had it as well, but I decided to go with a Sega Saturn. I was crushing that Street Fighter Alpha 2, Guardian Heroes, Virtua Fighter 2. I just think that was a great system that didn't really get the love that it deserved, specifically in North America, because I know it was popping in Japan. I think it was probably one of the bigger systems. Same thing with Dreamcast. I didn't have one, but I played it because one of my friends did. We're talking about the first time I experienced Soul Calibur. Fell in love with that game and that series. Also had Power Stone and Crazy Taxi on there, great games. And that system is just weird when I think about it. I think it just dropped at a weird time because it was kind of ahead of other systems in a bunch of different ways, and yet other people were playing all the other systems that were around. Just seems like it didn't really take off in North America, so I did get to experience a bit, which was cool. So fast forwarding a bit, I had a PS2 and then an Xbox 360, which ended up getting the red ring of death, so that kind of forced me into getting a PS3. And as of right now, I have a PS4 and 3DS. Those are the two systems that I'm really working with. The 3DS has held me down for years because its RPG library is just ridiculous. You're also getting a lot of classics on the eShop. And the fact that it's handheld has been a godsend for me. A lot of you know I have a couple kids here. I got another one on the way. I'm just very busy. So with the 3DS, I can actually move around and do all kinds of shit while I'm playing. I can close it and it pauses it. I can open it and kick off right where I was. But with a PlayStation, anyone with kids knows it is hard to get some gaming in because the kids are always wanting to turn the TV off, turn the game off. They always want to watch some Odd Bods or Sunny Bunnies or Yo Gabba Gabba Backyardigans or whatever. You know, they always want to switch it up. So you don't always really get to enjoy your gaming on one of those systems. But, you know, the 3DS has held me down a lot. And with the PS4, the games I really only go out of my way to buy are mostly RPGs. I do get the odd fighter because I put a lot of time into Mortal Kombat X. And when that new Soul Calibur comes out, man, I definitely want to play that. I've been in love with the Soul Calibur series for a long-ass time. I will talk about that in a minute. But I've also loved Fallout, Kingdom Hearts, and the Elder Scrolls games. These are just some of the titles that I really, really wait for. So I'm very excited to see that a lot of these series are putting out new games soon. To get back to Soul Calibur, I've been watching the trailers for that, and this shit looks incredible, man. I can't wait to get it. I'll get some of you guys online when I pick the game up, and then maybe we can beat each other's asses. That'll be kind of fun. But I was just glad to see that they're bringing the classic characters back. I saw when that last one came out, and it looked like it was just a bunch of new people, man. They had the shit all mixed up, so I wasn't too big on that. And it actually kind of reminded me of what Street Fighter did with Third Strike when they brought all these new people in, and people were like, what the hell? Mind you, that did grow on me with time. That game also had a great soundtrack, just to throw that out there. But I never really played that last Soul Calibur, but this one looks like they're going back to their roots, so I'll definitely be getting that. Now, I've also been watching the trailers for Kingdom Hearts. Just recently, they put out the Big Hero 6 world, so I saw how you're going to get to play with Baymax, the big red robot. That could be pretty fun. And even though I have no overall clue about the story, like, you know what the story's like with these games, it's so hard to follow because I played the ones on the PlayStations, I played the ones that were on DS. Some of the games are like 2.5, 2.8, 2.8 HD remix, 365 days, all kinds of shit. I can't even keep the title straight, but I played all kinds of them. Don't get the full story. Just love the gameplay, you know? Just fun to have a RPG that takes place in a Disney World. So definitely going to be getting that. And you know what the plus is? I'm going to be able to play that in front of my kids. They're going to think it's a movie or some shit. Just some crazy Disney movie. So, you know, that might work. They might not be messing around trying to turn my shit off like I was saying. That could be cool. As for the new Fallout, I like the past Fallouts, man. I played pretty much every Fallout. I didn't play the first one. I remember the second one when you had sort of an overhead view and then it became the first-person ones. But the new Fallout kind of disappointed me. I saw that it's going to be all online, and it's like, I don't want all online. I want to be able to play by myself. Then if I want to go online, maybe I can to get help or just join up with my buddies or something like that. I think that would have been a perfect idea. But instead, it's just going to be all online. So I'm going to have to pass on that because, like I said, got kids, really hard to get into any game. And when you're online, it's even harder because you can't pause it or anything like that. So going to have to pass on that one. And then with the new Elder Scrolls that was announced, they didn't really say too much about it. I just saw that they have a new one coming out, so I'll be getting that. I mean, I dumped hundreds of hours into Oblivion and Skyrim. Loved both of those games. And these are just perfect examples of why I like RPGs so much. Make your own characters, make your own path, do whatever the hell you want to do. That's what games are all about, you know? Just escaping the stress of life, getting some time to yourself to do what you want to do, and kind of go into another world. Really sounds dorky and nerdy, I know, but it is what it is. So these are some of the games I like. That's a brief history of where I'm at with gaming. That might have been kind of boring and ranty. I don't know. I just thought it would be cool for the first episode just to kind of lay that straight. We won't be doing this moving forward. I'll be talking about specific games that come out as I play them. Maybe doing some gaming reviews or whatever, which does lead me to the game I'm playing right now, Persona 5. This game is just damn near flawless in every way. Like, I'm only about 12 hours in. I know it's about 100 hours in length, so I'll probably put in like 120 or 30 just because I love to go all the way through. But so far, I'm just really enjoying everything about this. The music is great because you're getting a lot of jazzy, sort of R&B stuff. And that battle theme has got to be a top 10 RPG theme. I can't tell you how much I'm walking around my house saying, "You'll never see it coming." See? Not the singer. Sound like shit. But that part is so catchy. I love the battle music. There's a lot of other great themes and songs throughout. So, a great soundtrack is always great to have in an RPG. And the art direction in this is just beautiful, man. I love how vibrant the colors are. There's a lot of red and blacks that are being used. Everything just looks really sharp. So just having a game that sounds great and looks great, that goes a long way. Obviously, the gameplay matters, which I am going to talk about. But if a game looks like shit and has an awful soundtrack, it's definitely not going to be doing itself any favors. So right out of the gate, that's something I really enjoyed about this project. Look, I feel like I'm reviewing music. But that's what I really enjoyed about this game. It just sucked me in right away. As for the gameplay itself, I think the battle system is very rewarding. The characters in it are very strong too. Like, just as far as the individuality go, they all have a unique personality. They interact with each other in different ways outside of battle. In battle, they'll say different things, so that's very cool. And it is just your sort of typical turn-based JRPG system. You're also getting a little bit of a collection thing going on here, somewhat like Pokemon, where you collect these personas. They're like demons, so I like that. If you know the series, you're familiar. And just even the dungeon crawling is very fun. I like the way that it looks. You can get the jump on the bad guys, so it's not one of those games where you're just walking around and all of a sudden you're in a battle. You actually see them, so you can hit them from behind to ambush them. Again, you're getting the turn-based battles where you can pick different personas to do different spells, different everything, man. Like, every persona has different abilities, which is pretty cool. But outside of the battle, man, you can do so much in this game. You actually have to go to school every day, so you can answer questions, which will increase your stats. You can study, get a job, go to the batting cages. It's just very immersive, and it's almost like it's 2 games in 1, you know what I mean? I was really just happy with this game because I like how, some RPGs, it's just grind, go through the dungeon. But in this one, you get to do different things which do affect you when you do go into the dungeon. So you can sort of level up without just having to fight the same enemies over and over, although the grind is still there. And I'm someone who always grinds his ass off at these games. But I'm just loving this game so far. Maybe if I get further, I can do a bit more on it and just talk about where I'm at or how it is. But so far, I really like it. So I also just beat Persona Q. I'm not going to go too into detail on that because the segment is going pretty long, I think. But that was a fun game as well. And I saw that Persona Q2 is on the way. This will actually have some of the Persona 5 characters in it, whereas the first Persona Q only had Persona 3 and Persona 4 characters. So that one is a must-buy when it drops. Can't wait to get that. Still going to play through Persona 5 in the meantime and see where I go from there. But there you go, man. That was a bit of a long rant, just setting up my game experiences and history. Thank you for asking, Dr. Legs. Hopefully that wasn't too ranty and boring. Like, if you're not into games, you're probably listening to this shit like, what is this guy talking about? But if you're into games, I think you might appreciate some of that. But like I said, as this podcast moves forward, I'm going to improve my techniques and tactics, my topics. I'm going to have guests on to help break things up, but some of these solo ones are just going to be ranting about different things, so it is what it is. But coming up next, we are going to do some movie talk, man. I want to talk about that new Halloween trailer because I'm a big horror movie fan, so you can expect me to talk about some of those. And I also just watched Hereditary recently, so we'll talk about that. Next segment will probably be a little bit shorter, but I'll see you on the other side.
Yo, it's Dalmarat from fucking Auckland, New Zealand. You can check my shit on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever. Listen to my shit. It's not that bad. Alright, you're listening to the Luke James podcast. Right, peace.
Alright, we're back. That was an ad from Dharma Rat. He's a very good rapper coming out of Auckland over in New Zealand, so make sure you check out some of his music. I think if you've been following my channel, you're actually probably familiar with him already. I reviewed a bunch of his projects. He almost always makes my indie year-end list, so this is a guy who I think is on the come up and is definitely worth your time checking, so dope shit. But moving forward, we are going to do a little bit of a segment now. This is going to be a quick one because I think I'm trying to keep the podcast around half an hour, maybe a little bit over when it's just me. But once I have guests, I will be going longer because we'll be having longer conversations. But this last segment is just going to be talking about some of the horror movies that are out there, man. I'm a huge horror movie fan. Anyone that knows me knows that. I would say that's my favorite genre of movie. So whenever some new ones come out or I watch some new ones, maybe even watch some old ones because I use that Shudder app a lot, maybe I'll do a little bit of discussion about that. I actually talked to Mike Seatown from Dead End Hip Hop about maybe doing our top 10s. So I think that'd be fun to do. He's another guy who's big into horror movies, so that'd be an idea where I could have a longer podcast and we could break down some great horror movies. But right now I want to talk about this Hereditary movie. This one came out quite a while ago and people were just talking about how crazy it is. So I had to go and check it out for myself. Definitely think this is one of the best horror movies I've seen in a while. Very creepy setting. I love the cinematography in it as well because you're getting a lot of weird art. You're getting miniatures and sometimes the camera will zoom in on the miniatures and it'll be an actual scene. You'll know what I mean when you watch it. It's just very cool. And this is one that kind of has a lot of creepy jump scares and that sort of thing. Like when you see the old mom, the grandmother in the shadows, like close to the start. I'm not going to give away a bunch of stuff, but there's just this one scene where you see her kind of creeping in the back. That shit took me by surprise. That was super creepy. Later on in the movie, you're seeing like these naked cultists that pop up, and that shit is creepy as hell, just the look on their face and the way they're standing there. But you do get some pretty crazy gore scenes as well. Not going to spoiler one scene in particular. Anyone who watched this movie knows about the car scene. That shit was just so uncomfortable, man. There's something about watching people struggle to breathe, or, you know, in the Descent movies, I remember there's a scene where the girl's crawling through the rocks and she's kind of stuck. Those scenes always put me on edge. They just always make me uncomfortable. So you're getting one of those types of scenes in this movie, and then shit goes way left. Like shit goes crazy what happens to this little girl. So that's the part that everyone's talking about. Not going to give that up, but you are going to get some good gore here as well. And I think the acting was pretty good in this too. I just brought up the little girl. She has this very weird look. I ain't going to say she's ugly, man. She's just a little girl, but she has a very strange look. And they definitely kind of made her look rough in this movie. They made her look a little bit rougher and a little bit dirtier and just kind of sketchy. So I think she pulled that off very well. She played that part well. The brother, or the son, however we want to look at it, he's sort of just this slobbering, whiny guy. He played that part well. And even the dad was really good too. The dad stuck out to me because through the whole movie, his wife is basically going crazy. Like she's just acting like a weirdo. And he's just basically saying, man, what the hell's wrong with this bitch, man? She done lost her mind. She's crazy. But he plays the part so well because you can tell he's trying to kind of hold the family together, make sure things don't get out of hand. And that's basically what this whole movie is about. You are getting those supernatural elements, some cult elements, a little bit about demons and that sort of thing. But the underlying message or overlying message, just the whole idea or theme, is just a family that's all fucked up. I mean, it's called Hereditary, so it's about this sort of... God, it's so hard to talk about a movie without spoiling it. Like, I'm used to reviewing music where you just say exactly what's happening. I don't want to be on here telling everybody everything that happens. And this is one of those movies that's hard to talk about without spoiling because everything in it is sort of a surprise. Don't want to give it away. But hopefully the little bit I've said so far has you interested and makes you want to check it out. I just think it's a great movie. That's one of the best horror movies I've seen in a while, for sure. I tend to watch a lot of older movies as well, so a lot of the horror movies I watch are kind of, you know, I have a soft spot for those 80s and 90s slashers. I'm sure when me and Mike break down our horror movies, we'll talk about that a lot. I mentioned the Shudder app. No, they're not sponsoring this. I don't have any sponsors or anything yet. Maybe someday I will. But if you're a horror fan, man, you gotta check out Shudder. It's fantastic. It's really like Netflix for horror movies. It's only like $5 a month. And I watch it all the time, man. Whenever you want to watch horrors or thrillers, even if you're into some of that crazy Japanese shit like Visitor Q. What are some of the other ones you did? God, it's just all of a sudden escaping me. Audition, Ichi the Killer, those types of movies. Has a lot of good gore movies, horror movies, thrillers, and that sort of stuff on there. So I use that a lot to watch a bunch of movies. There's another one I watched recently on there called Downrange. It's about these kids that get stuck out on the highway and there's a sniper who's just picking them off one by one. That one was pretty cool. That had a lot of gore in it, so that might be worth your time. But the movie I'm most excited for now, I know The Nun came out and everyone's talking about that. I'm not too crazy about those movies, but maybe I'll see it, or, you know, I might wait till it comes on Blu-ray or is leaking somewhere or something like that. But the new Halloween looks amazing. I saw the trailer for it. I saw just the other day they did the screening and pretty much everybody is ranting and raving about how good it is. They're saying that it really goes back to the old school Halloween. And that has me pumped up, man. I think, you know, over the past couple of years, we've just been getting so many paranormal movies, ghost movies, cult movies, that sort of stuff. And I do like those once in a while. Like, some of them are really good. I'd use It Follows as an example. That one's sort of a paranormal one where this sexual demon is basically passed on through people. Really weird concept. Like, when you hear about it, it sounds stupid. I thought it was going to be stupid, but I watched it and enjoyed it. These are the types of movies that are really, you know, these have taken over horror in the past little while. Whereas when I was coming up as an 80s baby, so coming up mostly in the 90s, early 2000s, it was a lot of slashers and just gory stuff. But really, horror has switched up a lot. You can look at movies also like The Babadook, where, again, this is sort of a theme about a family that's being torn apart. There's this demon or creature that's sort of there. Or is he really there? Or is it the mom? There's just a different thing happening. But I'm just hoping this new Halloween movie does well and brings slasher movies back, because they get kind of campy and cheesy sometimes, but it looks like this movie is really going back to the roots. All the people that were ranting and raving about it said that it's very dark, twisted, you are getting the gore, but they've made the slasher movie scary again. They really make it seem real and believable. I mean, as believable as you can, because there's always a bit of a supernatural element with Michael Myers. You can shoot the motherfucker 20 times, he's still going to come back. Busta Rhymes beat his ass one time. I think LL Cool J was in one of the movies too, so you never know what Michael Myers is getting into. But I really hope it does well. I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see Michael Myers back. In the trailer, Jamie Lee Curtis is back as well, she is out to kill him and get rid of him. It just looks really good, man. I like the idea of redoing these horror classics, but keeping them true to how they really were. I remember the Nightmare on Elm Street remake was just garbage. Like, that was honestly one of the worst movies I think I ever seen in my life. I remember watching that and I just hated everything about it. The way Freddy looked, the way he sounded. You just can't really do a Nightmare on Elm Street without Robert Englund. I don't think you can, unless you're going to find someone who can really mimic pretty much exactly what he was doing, get the same sort of makeup, yada, yada, yada. So, that was bad. The Friday the 13th remake, I actually thought that was dope. That's one of my favorite series, so I did like what they did with that one. Thought they kept it pretty true to the series with a fresh spin on it. But I was disappointed that the new Friday the 13th, they were working on another one. It didn't come out. I actually read some of the script on it, and they were really going to get into detail about where Jason came from, who his father was, some of the stuff with his mom, a little bit like like a prologue. That's what comes before, right? The prologue. The beginning of the shit, it was really going to go back. So I thought that would have been cool to see. That seems to be the move that a lot of movies, especially horror movies, are doing now. They're not always doing sequels, they're doing prequels, and they're sort of going backwards and telling you the story. Seeing the same thing happen with Star Wars, obviously not a horror movie, but it's kind of cool how, movie studios think that way now. Sometimes you can progress the story by actually taking a step back and just explaining things further. So I'm excited to see the new Halloween. Other horror movies I watched recently, I watched the new Jeepers Creepers a while ago. I forget which one it was, 3 or 4, whatever the newest one is. And that shit was awful, man. I mean, it was so bad that it was kind of fun to watch. There are some cool gore effects. You got the monster flying around and shit. But the acting in it is just atrocious. The characters are hateable. The story was, nothing special. I feel like sometimes you got to like the characters to really get invested in a horror movie. Of course, you got the ones like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street where it's just teens partying, having sex, drinking, doing drugs so they get knocked off. But it does help when you connect with the characters in some sort of way or really care about them. But when you're watching a horror movie and you're just like, man, everybody in this movie is annoying, I want them all to die, really kind of takes the suspense away because you're just waiting for them to die anyway. You just don't care. Either way, I'm just happy to see that horror movies in general are doing well. Seems like they really fell off, a couple years ago they weren't doing too well. But just to see, even some of the ones I'm not big on, some of that paranormal stuff, cultist stuff, exorcist stuff, whatever, just to see that horror movies are really making some money and people care, that interest is there, that's a good thing because that's only going to help us get more. You know what I mean? I think one of the last horror movies I actually saw in theater, though, I don't go to the theater that often because you know what it's like, man. Especially if you're going with somebody, you're going to spend like $100 just to have a popcorn and a soda or a pop. That's actually what we say. Can't believe I said soda, man. Look at me cheating on my own dialect. Pop. Going for some popcorn and some poppity pop pop. But yeah, I don't go to the theater often because of how expensive it is, but I did go see that Evil Dead remake just to come back again to talking about remakes. And that remake was great, man. That one was crazy. Didn't really have the humor that the original ones had, but certainly had the gore, certainly had the story. It was kind of true to the story and what went on, so that was good. But we'll see what happens. I mean, my life is so busy with these damn kids, with full-time work, trying to do the reviews and this and that. I usually end up just watching movies when they come out, when I can, watch them online. Because a lot of movies, they come out pretty quick online, too. Even if you want to watch or rent them off of YouTube or Amazon or something like that for like $3 or $4, that's one way you can do it. Of course, you can always find stuff to stream as well. Like, movies are always out there. There's always a way, but it's very rare I go to the theater. But either way, once I watch some of these new movies, if I do, I'm sure I'll talk about them. Again, you guys can send in whatever it is you want me to talk about. I'm going to wrap this podcast up now. So like I said, I'm not going to keep it too long when it's just me talking. I get ranty and I get ravey, but whatever topics you want to hear me talk about, any questions you have, like you can ask me about anything, whether it's sports, wrestling. I'm sure I'll do some wrestling stuff on here as well when there's some major pay-per-views. Anything you want to talk about, man. If you want to ask me for some life advice, if you just want another opinion on stuff, music, video games, whatever. I'm going to just compile a bunch of questions. So if you sent me some questions and I didn't use them, I am going to keep those, so don't worry about it. I'll use those in future podcasts. This is my first one, so I just really wanted to speak on Mac Miller. I wanted to lay the foundation for my video game talk, just because I thought that was a good question to let you guys know, and also lay a bit of a foundation in regards to the type of movies I like, horror movies. So you know, this will get better. The more I do this podcast, it's going to get better. I'll get more comfortable. I'll get my editing tactics down, whatever. If you listen this far, thank you. That's a good sign. At least, you know, you didn't turn it off right away, so I'm doing something right. But I'll make sure I work at it and get better at it. The guests are going to help a lot. They'll help me be able to stretch this out to probably an hour, hour and a half, just because then you're actually talking to somebody. You don't have to just sit here and rant and rave about things. So we'll see where it goes. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Let me know what you think. Again, you can hit up Luke at redmattersite.com. That's SITE. You know, if you want your music reviewed, as always, I'm still going to be doing those. If you want some promo, you know, it's possible I might be able to put some sort of ads in here once in a while, depending on how that goes, if you got something you want to promote. Yeah, so help me keep this podcast going. Let me know what it is you guys like, what you want to hear, what you want me to talk about. Still going to keep doing reviews on the channel. But thank you for listening. See, I was about to say thank you for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time. But that shit doesn't work. So we're going to have to come up with a clever way to end the podcast. I don't get it now, so I'm just going to say I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.